Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is John. Welcome back to another episode of the Subcontinent. Our program aims to address important issues in the region of South Asia, which affect the governments, people, organizations, and the region as a whole. We will try to explain the issues, break down controversies surrounding them, and try to have some external perspectives from experts and people.
In this edition of the Subcontinent, we are going to talk about the coup d'etat in Myanmar and the whole story behind the decades-long internal conflict. Then we throw more light on the after effects of this drastic change for the Burmese people, as well as the regional and global perspectives on the unfolding events.
Burmese are out on the streets protesting against a coup in which Myanmar's ruling party, led by Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, was deposed by the country's military. Daw Suu and President Win Myint, along with dozens of their ministers, their deputies and members of the parliament, are being kept in confinement since many weeks, while the country is at the scene of almost everyday bloody clashes between the police and the people.
It was early in the morning of February 1st when Myanmar's military toppled the government, officially ending a short test run of democracy in the country. Should the day have unfolded as planned, the parliament was due to swear in the newly elected members, thereby enshrining the results of the November election. But the army took over the country to reinstall stratocracy, an amalgam of authoritarian ideas parading as majority-driven. Like all similar coup scenarios, the military cut all communication services, declared a state of emergency, and detained senior figures of the civilian government, most notably Daw Aung San Suu Kyi.
The military has played electoral politics, the game that they have lost every time they held elections and Aung San Suu Kyi and Popular National League for Democracy contested. Yet in the last 30 years, since 1990, the military held 5 elections, including 1 by-election in 2012. The first one, 1990, second one, 2015, which NLD did not participate, and then 2012, and then 2015 and 2020. 4 out of 5 past elections in 30 years, Aung San Suu Kyi and her Popular National League for Democracy defeated the military-backed political proxies in the parliament in crushing or landslide wins. So therefore, the military as an institution did not want to play this game where they are beaten every single time they play against Popular Democratic National League for Democracy.
The celebrity activist became the first elected head of state following about 20 years of opposition against the military junta, most of it in house arrest. She is the youngest daughter of Aung San, the father of modern-day Myanmar. He was the man who founded the new Burmese army. The dethroned ruling party was supposed to be Myanmar's comeback to the democratic world after over half a century beset with political instability, especially since 1948 when it declared independence from Britain.
About a decade ago, the country's military rulers felt they needed a more democratic look for better interaction with the international community. Emboldened by their sense of popularity among the Burmese, the military, or Tam Tadwa, decided to let Daw Suu's political party have a chance in the election 5 years later. Her sweeping victory was promulgated as the country's democratic rebirth. But in reality, almost everything was still under the junta's control.
Via Myanmar's military apparatus had made sure that key areas of power remain under its well-established reach, but the coup has revealed that Aung San Suu Kyi's wild popularity was still frightening for them. The general election in November sounded more alarms for the top brass as the National League for Democracy, Suu Kyi's party, won in a landslide and secured 85% of the seats. The main opposition party was led by the military and only garnered about 7%. It seems that the army did not manage to come to grips with the reality of their humiliating blow and called the election fraudulent. Most observers report otherwise. Despite the loss, the military still had enormous executive power as well as many reserved seats on top of the veto power over the parliament's reforms, thanks to their tailor-made changes in the constitution over the years.
Before the coup gave General Min Aung Hlaing complete authority over the country, Suu Kyi was about to start her new term as the state councillor, a position specifically invented for her. With powers akin to those of a prime minister, it was created to circumvent a phrase that bars anyone who has family members with other citizenships from becoming presidents. Suu Kyi's now deceased husband was British and her 2 children are UK citizens. But her power was limited as the military drafted constitution reserves 25% of parliamentary seats for unelected military representatives, essentially preventing the NLD party from amending the constitution.
Myanmar's Tatmadaw had made sure that key areas of power remain under its well-established reach, but the coup has revealed that Aung San Suu Kyi's wild popularity was still frightening for them. Although the former arrangement of power was still a blend of civilian government along with a powerful military, this was the closest Myanmar had ever moved towards democracy. That window is closed now, but the people who experienced a touch of democracy during the last 5 years don't want the dark days back. The future is grim, and days are gloomy for the Burmese protesters who are getting injured and even killed during the military crackdown of the ongoing protests almost on a daily basis. Undeterred by the police killings, protesters have promised unrelenting demonstrations until their demands are met. On the other hand, the new boss of the country has warned of severe consequences for those who defy the orders, but the international community has called on the military to relinquish power and curb the heavy-handed crackdown. But what else could you expect from your typical Dawo military man?
The members of the Security Council expressed deep concern at the declaration of a state of emergency imposed in Myanmar by the military on the 1st of February and the arbitrary detention of members of the government, including State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi and President Win Myint and others. They called for the immediate release of all those detained.
The Security Council, with its 5 veto wielders, is never going to agree on anything that is significant and impactful to the lives of billions of humans. And, Security Council is, for all intents and purposes, in a perpetual coma because it's so torn by a conflicting geopolitical and economic interest among the top 5 world leaders or leading governments. And so I'm not surprised that Security Council failed once again to take any meaningful action. And secondly, I think this is also the body that failed to act in the face of a genocide. Genocide is international, interstate treaty, and Myanmar is clearly found to be violating the terms of this treaty. And the Security Council has a responsibility to act, and it failed to do so. And so I'm not surprised that the British table motion or statement did not garner enough support or consensus to it isn't even a binding resolution or anything. It's just a statement condemning the coup. And then with respect to India and Vietnam, well, Vietnam is also essentially a dictatorial one-party state, operating under the banner of socialism or a semi-communism. And the Vietnamese military, Vietnamese telecom companies are in cahoots with the Burmese military and its telecom industry run by the Burmese military and cronies. And so, it's just a matter of birds of the same feather sticking together. India is just an interesting case because India has not been supportive of Burmese democratic movement for the last 25 years or so, despite its initial support for democratic movement, in 1988. Indian military has also been courting the Burmese military to try to counter the Chinese influences. So therefore, India has consistently backed the Burmese military regime when it comes to people's democratic aspirations or struggle. Since the Obama administration, the Americans decided to bring the Burmese military from the cold because it did not want Burma to be too close to China. And so the US accepted, deeply flawed, even, anti-democratic process dressed up as the Myanmar Spring.
Back in 2011, the Obama administration was so excited to welcome Myanmar's democratic maneuver that the US administration moved fast to remove the sanctions the US imposed on the country earlier and restored the US ambassador there. Barack Obama even paid a visit to Daw Soo's house in Yangon, where she had spent many years of detention. Now, the State Department has expressed support for the protesters, but what does it mean for their bilateral relations? Any adversarial move by the Biden administration would potentially push Myanmar to Beijing's orbit, which has described the coup as a major cabinet reshuffle.
When Suu Kyi finally made some sort of arrangement with the military and took power, she did not seem to be the same activist she was known and won a Nobel Award for. She was the actual top decision maker on many fundamental areas, including economy, healthcare and education. However, not only she failed to end the country's drawn-out civil wars or recast Myanmar as a multicultural society, but also she sided with the executioners and denied the facts about the systematic genocide of Rohingya people by the military. She even went to The Hague to defend the military, perhaps to stay in power.
Roughly about 500,000 or 600,000 Rohingyas, and about 100,000 are in IDP camps, where they have been kept, against their will for the last 8 years. No livelihood opportunities, no school, no proper schooling, let alone universities. And the 100,000 Rohingyas are languishing in these IDP camps, which German Foreign Office officials consider a concentration camp, camps. And then you've got another, 400,000 plus that are scattered across the different parts of northern Rakhine. And they are in open prison camps from where they cannot leave. They can't move from one city to another. They cannot migrate, legally. And so I think their situation remains rather dire. And with the release of ex-genocidal nationalist Rakhines, a lot of Rohingyas fear that they may be scapegoated again for another round of violence.
Her newly recognized support for the military junta don't seem to be helping her now, but it may keep bothering her conscience, together with those of all members of the board that gave her the Nobel Prize. She may have started as the country's heroine of democracy, but this seems like one of those narratives whose protagonist passes the grey area and becomes a villain as soon as she or he gets to power.
All right, now to have more insight and analysis, we are joined by Mr. Nasan Lin, who's a coordinator at the Free Rohingya Coalition from Frankfurt. Mr. Lin, welcome to this show again. So, what led to the military coup in Myanmar? Was it expected?
Yeah, we know that this will happen after the election because military-backed proxy party lost in the election, and the ruling party have got a landslide victory. So it is very simple. The military chief, Min Aung Hlaing, he has the personal invasion that he wants to become the president of the country, and he's going to retire in a few months. So he thought that his Prausi party will win in the election and he will become the president. But when his Prausi party lost in the election, he was just accusing there is irregularity in the border list and there is the electoral fraud. Those all are the lame excuse. And finally, he said, they detained the Aung San Suu Kyi and the president and also the political activists and the parliament member, and successfully coup the power. So it is not the first time in Myanmar. It is third time since 1962. Only 5 years from between 1962 to 2021. Only 5 years the civilian government ruled the country, but the civilian government didn't have the full power, but military was military had the de facto power.
So, Mr. Lin, what will happen to the popular protests in the country right now? And how are these protests different from the protests that we saw in the past?
I was a young boy during the 1988 uprising. But if I have to compare with this 88 uprising and the now 2021, so now they have the curfew. They cannot assembly, they cannot gather more than 5 people, but they are still on. They take to the street and protesting. 10,000 of people, maybe across the country. A few million people are every day, they are marching to somewhere and protesting this military. So I think, even the curfew cannot stop these people. So they are organizing the protests. The protests are increasing day by day. And this is also not going the pressure because, in the beginning, the military charged the Aung San Suu Kyi with the, export-import law. Now they added another, the national disaster law, and, the president also. So they are not going to release. They are arresting the people every day. So they are not going to release. So what we need is a strong international pressure. Like, the US already imposed the sanction, but most of the people from Myanmar, they are asking the US military intervention.
Mr. Lin, before moving ahead, let's just please take a look at how the global media has covered this issue, and then we can come back.
A big concern is whether there will be violence or a public backlash against the military. Anticipating the coup, Suu Kyi, in a prepared statement, called for non-violent opposition, but the country is like a tinderbox and a small incident could lead to conflagration. As important, there's every possibility that ongoing conflicts against ethnic armed groups could escalate. The crackdown on any dissent will undoubtedly extend to border states that are dominated by ethnic minorities, raising the risk of intensified conflict. The UN Security Council, China, the European Union and the United States, among others, have urged the Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN regional grouping to help mediate in the crisis. The Indonesian plan also calls for ASEAN to facilitate dialogue between the junta and protesters, according to 2 officials and a third source familiar with it. Indonesia is pushing Southeast Asian neighbors to agree on an action plan over Myanmar's coup that would keep the junta to its promise of holding elections, with monitors to ensure they are fair and inclusive. The takeover, coming against the backdrop of a deepening US-China rivalry, pits the foreign policy strategies of the two powers against each other, and it thrusts Myanmar on the front lines of an increasingly tense geopolitical competition for global leadership. The US has framed its approach to Myanmar as a push for democracy and human rights. The focus of Beijing, which says it has a policy of non-interference in the domestic affairs of other countries, has largely been on economic and strategic interests. The differences were clear in the response by the two nations to the coup. While US social networks have often been reluctant to pick sides in political disputes, Facebook is taking direct steps to stop distribution of the military's narrative in the country. The company is curbing the reach of its information team and spokesperson Brigadier General Zaw Min Toon, adding this same action will be applied to any additional pages that the army controls that repeatedly violate our misinformation policies, it said in a statement.
All right, welcome back, Mr. Lin. So, Mr. Lin, what are the consequences that you foresee in terms of the condition of the Rohingya and this coup?
Rohingya, let me talk about the Rohingya inside the country. There are about 600,000 Rohingya, about 140,000 are in the concentration camp since 2012, and the remaining are in the open air prison. So we are in the worst situation since 1992. We have no freedom of movement, very little access to the education, the healthcare, and all are, they're restricted. So they have, already wiped off the majority of the people. Now they are taking shelter in Bangladesh. So what we are worried is this May Online military chief has said, this is the Rohingya genocide is and finished business. So now he has the full power, and nobody can stop him. We are really worried for the people remaining inside the country. Maybe he can launch a violence against them and wipe up the remaining people from there. So at the same time, he said he will bring the refugee from. He used the term internally displaced, the people from the Bangladesh, according to the agreement, bilateral agreement they had. So we are also really worried, these people will be pushed back from Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is really happy with this, the letter sent by the military regime to the Bangladesh government. So we are really worried, these people will be repatriated without citizenship, protection, and ethnic rights, and the right to return to the original villages.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Lin, for being with us on our show. Unfortunately, that marks the end of our question and answer session. Viewers, many people have voiced their opinions on cyberspace and social media. Let's just take a quick look.
Matthew Tostavin tries to reflect the mass anti-coup demonstrations in Yangon, Myanmar. Karen Kin believes that while the people are empty-handed against the Juna and their weaponry, the power of people is more. Kenneth Roth refers to the deployment of an infantry division by the junta to defend the coup. He also mentions that according to the UN rapporteur, the division is responsible for the atrocities against the Rohingya. Although Muhammad Pakravan supports the movement against the junta, he criticizes the mainstream of the Democrats for being silent on the Rohingya issue, and he believes such a democracy won't last long and it's natural.
And that was our episode covering the coup d'etat in Myanmar and the whole story behind the decades-long internal conflict. To watch bits of our episodes and for more updates, follow us on our social media platforms, and please make sure to give us feedback about what you think. We'll meet the same time, same day next week. Thanks for watching.